So it looks like that the original Saints Row developer says he wants to work on the franchise again and wants to go as far as to reaching out to Embracer Group. Specifically speaking, the original Saints Row design director says Embracer should call him to reboot the series, basically rebooting the reboot. Chris Stockman was the design director of the original Saints Row, a hugely successful action adventure that spawned a series that remained relatively popular until its untimely demise in 2022. Following Volition's botched reboot of the series, Stockman, whose studio Bit Planet Games now primarily works on virtual reality games, recently spoke to Esports Insider about the legacy of Saints Row and the future of the shelved series. Stockman believes the reboot was fundamentally flawed because players had grown attached to the series' various characters over the years. In his view, a prequel would have been a better way to continue the series. Quote, when I found out that they were rebooting Saints Row, I spoke to an old friend of mine who was my boss for Saints Row 1. He was a producer, and I was learning about what they were doing, and I thought, man, this is a terrible idea. There are a lot of characters in the series that people love. It wasn't Saints Row at all. Just call it something else at that point. There is a level of expectations for a Saints Row game, and they missed the mark on all of them. What I would have done was to take the franchise back to the 70s and do a period piece, a prequel of how the games from the first one started. If you're running around with a crew of teens that ended up as the main characters for the first game, you could really go all in the 70s theme with big afros, bell bottoms, and the music of that whole period. Quote, Embracer, if you're listening to this, contact me. I could bring a bunch of the old band together who worked on Saints Row 1, could turn the IP around with a decent budget. They don't even have to fund it. I could get other outside people to fund it. I could turn the franchise around. I know I could. Here's the thing. I think that he needs to be careful because working with Embracer Group is like working with the devil. You're meeting them at the crossroads to sell your soul for some talent. And I know that may sound like a lot. I just think he needs to be very wary because Embracer, they have a knack of trying to gobble up as many studios as they possibly can and then end up, shutting them down. Basically EA, but 10 times worse on steroids. If anything, I think an alternative solution could be if he goes to this brand new studio that the former Volition devs made called Shapeshifter Games, if him and whoever else wants to go over there and say, hey, would we want to make our own version of Saints Row? Basically a spinoff of a spinoff in a sense, because Saints Row in of itself was a spinoff of Grand Theft Auto, and they could just essentially make a spinoff of Saints Row. It wouldn't be called Saints Row, it would be called something else. I don't know if they trademark purple, but it would be an easy layup. Now, whether he's talking about going to a different studio that's at Embracer that has the Saints Row IP or his own studio that has been making VR games is yet to be seen. But with the reputation that IP is like literally in the toilet, I know people could in a way say the same thing about Dragon Age and Mass Effect, especially after Andromeda, but at least Andromeda has something going for it with the gameplay and the exploration aspect of it. But a Saints Row prequel involving a playable Julius or a playable Benjamin King, I think that'd be pretty dope to see. Hell, I think a lot of people would have preferred that over than what we got. Hell, we were supposed to get Saints Row 5, aka Saints Row 5. But the biggest problem with that is, do you have to worry about Deep Silver's influence? Because keep in mind, the reason why the Saints Row reboot was gutted the way it was because of them. Same thing when it comes to responding to people on Twitter in the way and manner in which that they did. That was all on Deep Silver. Deep Silver was running those accounts, not Volition. And that's something that's been widely reported by a lot of prominent members of the Saints Row community. Now, do I think they would jump back into the toxic waters of that IP right now? No, it's too soon. I think they would be better off just selling that IP to somebody. Hell, if you want to just get the IP to Shapeshifter Games, and the Saints 1 design director, he could just go to Shapeshifter and say, hey, y'all want to work on Saints Row? And they could actually make their own version of Saints Row, what they wanted it to be, and not what Deep Silver wanted them to make. Like, for fuck's sake, Deep Silver was complaining to them about it was too much violence in the game, or at least in the prototype build that they saw. But if they don't give that IP to somebody else, I don't know who the hell they're and Embracer could make a Saints Row game. I really don't. Outside of Flying Wild Hog, I don't know who could. And those are the people who's been behind the Evil West game and Shadow Warrior games. If anything, they can sell that IP to somebody like PlayStation, and I don't want to sound like a pony when I say this, but objectively speaking, I think PlayStation Studios collectively and individually has a better shot at bringing back the Saints Row IP to at least the bare minimum respectable route instead of anybody else at Embracer besides Flying Wild Hog. And if hypothetically speaking, if they did sell that IP to PlayStation, I think the only studio who I could think that would be perfect, a shoe-in to work on a Saints Row game would be Blue Point Games. Let them put out a Saints Row 1 remake, and I'm pretty sure they'll knock it out the park. Because they killed it with the Demon's Souls remake. They did a pretty good job with Shadow of Colossus remake. And just to make the IP in a more respectable light, at least, a remake like that to the first game, I think would do wonders. And I could also see somebody make a CJ mod for Saints Row 1 on PC. Hell, it probably already exists right now with the vanilla game. But if I'm being realistic, we may not hear high nor hear of that IP for at least another 5 or so years before they decide to take another risk like that. But with that being said, y'all let me know what you think about this in the comments below. Till next time, I'll see y'all in the next video. Peace.